Welcome to this episode of More Than Just a Score. As the 2026 FIFA World Cup approaches, we continue our series that digs deeper into the beautiful game and the World Cup itself. As always, if you enjoyed this story, do us a favor and hit the like and subscribe buttons. If he isn't the greatest to ever lace up a pair of boots and kick a ball, he is most certainly in the greatest starting 11 of all time. Edson Arantes do Nascimento was a magician of the pitch, and he helped launch football from being just a sport enjoyed by millions into an obsession felt around the globe. He is synonymous with Brazilian creativity and football artistry. He's also best known simply as Pelé. Before the world would call him O Rei or the King, before the yellow shirt of Brazil became a symbol of joy and incredible skill, he was just a boy born on October 23, 1940 in Três Corações, Brazil. His father, João Ramos do Nascimento, or better known as Dondinho, had been a professional footballer himself. His mother, Celeste Arantes, helped hold the family together through difficult circumstances. Pelé grew up in poverty in Bauru, shining shoes, working small jobs, or learning to play football on the streets, where imagination was paramount to make up for a lack of equipment. That part of the story matters because Pelé's football was never about technique. It was more about invention that was born from scarcity. He later remembered playing with rolled up socks stuffed with paper or whatever would pass for a ball. His father taught him the game not as a formal coach with cones and drills, but as someone who understood rhythm, balance, timing, and the poetry of controlling something that wants to run away from you. The nickname Pelé came from childhood, and like many legends, its origin was slightly messy. It may have come from the way he mispronounced the name of a local goalkeeper called Pelé. Now, Pelé himself didn't really like the nickname at first. His youth was shaped by two powerful forces: poverty and Brazil's relationship with football. In 1950, while he was still just a child, Brazil hosted the World Cup and was expected to win it. Instead, Uruguay stunned the hosts at the Maracanã in a match that became a national trauma. Pelé later said he saw his father cry after that defeat and promised he would one day win a World Cup for him. Whether remembered through childhood emotion or later legend, that story captures something essential. Pelé grew up in a country where football wasn't simply recreation, it was pride, identity, and an escape. To become great in Brazil meant carrying more than just yourself. His first serious football education came with youth teams in Bauru, including a side coached by former Brazil international Valdemar Jabrito, who recognized something unusual in the teenager: speed and balance mixed with nerve and a natural goal scorer's hunger. In 1956, he brought Pelé to Santos and reportedly told the club that this boy would become the greatest player in the world. It sounded absurd at the time. Pelé was just 15. But Santos took the chance, and Brazilian, and indeed world football, changed forever. Pelé made his senior debut for Santos in 1956. By 1957, he was already scoring regularly and had earned a place with Brazil's national team at 16. Santos was not merely a club for him, it became the platform from which he conquered the football world. In an age before European club football had swallowed the global spotlight, Santos became an international attraction. The club toured the world because everyone wanted to see Pelé. He was not only a footballer playing for a Brazilian club, he was a traveling spectacle, a young man whose name could fill stadiums in countries far from Brazil. His style was complete in a way that still feels modern. Pelé could score with either foot, leap above defenders, and create for teammates, all while finishing chances with startling calm. He wasn't the tallest player, but he would seem to hang in the air. He wasn't just fast, he was explosive. His dribble could change the geometry of a match. Most importantly, he scored. Again and again in every kind of way. For Santos, he became the club's all-time leading scorer with 569 goals in competitive matches for the club. He played so much and scored so much, he took football into so many different settings that his career became almost too large for ordinary accounting. At Santos, the trophies came quickly. He helped the club win multiple national titles, the peak of Santos' power coming in 1962 and 63, when the club won the Copa Libertadores, South America's greatest club competition. Those victories carried Santos into the Intercontinental Cup, where they defeated Europe's champions and announced that the best club football in the world wasn't necessarily being played on the other side of the Atlantic. In 1962, Santos beat Benfica, the great Portuguese side led by Eusebio, and Pelé delivered one of the most devastating performances of his career, scoring 5 of his club's 8 goals across the 2 legs. In 1963, Santos defeated AC Milan. With Pelé, Santos became a club of global consequence. But if Santos made Pelé a phenomenon, the World Cup made him immortal. In 1958, Brazil arrived in Sweden, carrying the weight of 1950 and the frustration of 1954. He was only 17 years old and was recovering from a knee injury and not certain to be central to the tournament, but once he entered the team, everything changed. He scored the winner against Wales in the quarterfinal, becoming the youngest goal scorer in World Cup history at the time. Then came the semifinal against France, where he scored a hat-trick. In the final against the host Swedes, he scored 2 more goals, including a goal of outrageous composure, controlling the ball, lifting it over a defender, and volleying it into the net.
Pelé, inlägg från Nilton Santos. Pelé, ja det är lysande. Titta på uppvisningen. Det är makalöst. Det är fullständigt enastående. Det är 3-1 för Brasilien, Pelé.
Brazil had won 5-2. Pelé was carried off in tears. A boy had kept what had seemed to be an impossible promise to his father and to his country. The 1958 World Cup did more than crown Brazil. It introduced a new kind of football hero. Pelé was young, black, brilliant, and spectacular in an era when television was just beginning to shrink the world. Brazil's yellow shirts, their attacking rhythm, and Pelé's joyful genius became inseparable. He was nicknamed O Rei, or the King, and the title stuck. Football had stars before Pelé, but after 1958, it had a global superstar. In 1962, Pelé arrived in Chile as the best player in the world. He began the tournament in frightening form, scoring against Mexico and showing the same authority that had defined his rise. Then injury struck against Czechoslovakia in Brazil's second match. Pelé's tournament was effectively over. Brazil, however, had extraordinary depth and ended up winning the trophy again. Pelé was part of a second World Cup winning squad, but his body had reminded everyone that even kings could be vulnerable. The 1966 World Cup in England was the hardest chapter of his international career. Brazil arrived aiming for a 3rd straight title, but that tournament had a real brutality to it. He was fouled repeatedly and left battered and injured by opponents who understood that stopping him meant physically breaking his rhythm. Brazil exited in the group stage, and Pelé was so disillusioned that he suggested that he might never play in another World Cup. It was a moment when the beautiful game looked anything but beautiful, and its greatest artist seemed to have almost been driven away from the stage. Thankfully, he would come back. By 1970, he was 29, older, wiser, and surrounded by one of the greatest teams ever assembled. If 1958 was the arrival of a prodigy, 1970 was the masterpiece of a mature artist. Pelé didn't need to dominate every second. He conducted, combined, and finished. Against Czechoslovakia, he nearly scored from the halfway line.
Cagara, demostrando su dureza. Bien abajo Clodoaldo. Pelé.
Then against England, his header forced Gordon Banks into one of the most famous saves ever made. Against Uruguay in the semi-final, his dummy around the goalkeeper without touching the ball became an act of football genius that people still discuss, despite the shot rolling just wide. Then came the final against Italy at the Azteca. Pelé opened the scoring with a towering header rising above the defenders with perfect timing.
And here's Rivellino. And Pelé! Well, it had to be Pelé. Look at the climb here. And Bertozzi with little chance with a header as powerful as that.
Brazil would go on to win 4-1. The fourth goal, finished by Carlos Alberto after a sweeping team move, became perhaps the most famous team goal in World Cup history. Pelé's pass into Alberto's stride was simple, perfectly weighted, and surgical.
Jairzinho. And Pelé. And Carlos Alberto's coming up on his right. Oh, magnificent. Magnificent.
It wasn't just a goal. It was an argument for football as a It wasn't just a goal. It was an argument for football as a form of art. Brazil became the first nation to win the World Cup 3 times and kept the Jules Rimet trophy permanently because it was replaced by the trophy that fans are familiar with today. Pelé became the only player to win 3 World Cups. His international record remains one of the greatest monuments of the sport. Pelé scored 77 goals in 92 appearances for Brazil, a record that stood for decades. He wasn't simply a goal scorer. He had a knack for scoring a lot of goals at the most important moments. His World Cup career gave him a mythology that no player since has fully matched. Others have won more club trophies in Europe under brighter statistical microscopes, but no one else has been the central symbol of 3 World Cup winning squads. After 1970, Pelé gradually moved toward the end of his Brazilian career. He retired from international football in 1971. Santos remained his home until the mid-1970s, though the club and player were no longer at the untouched height of the early 1960s. By then, Pelé was not just an athlete, he was a brand, an ambassador, and a national treasure. He was also in some ways a prisoner of his own fame. Brazil's government understood his symbolic power, sponsors got his commercial power, fans felt his emotional power, everyone wanted a piece of him. In 1975, Pelé did something that seemed strange at first, but historic later. He came out of semi-retirement to sign with the New York Cosmos of the North American Soccer League. Now, soccer in the United States was still far from mainstream, and the Cosmos were ambitious, but far from a cultural force. Pelé's arrival changed that overnight. He made his Cosmos debut against the Dallas Tornado on June 15, 1975. He also scored in a 2-all draw. More importantly, he made American sports fans and media pay attention. Crowds grew, television interest rose, and other stars followed him to the NASL, including Franz Beckenbauer, Carlos Alberto, Johan Cruyff, Eusebio, and George Best. Pelé didn't make the United States a football country, but he planted a seed that would grow with younger generations. His final season in 1977 gave the American chapter a fitting ending. Pelé helped the Cosmos win Soccer Bowl 77 by defeating the Seattle Sounders 2-1. Then on October 1st, 1977, he played his farewell match in a friendly at Giant Stadium between the Cosmos and Santos. He wore a Cosmos shirt for one half and then a Santos shirt for the other. Muhammad Ali was there. So were other great names, as well as thousands of fans who understood that they were watching the end of an era. Pelé also scored on a free kick for the Cosmos.
Pelé with a hard shot into the goal! A shot into the goal! Pelé has scored in his last half for the Cosmos. And this is what today is all about. Look at them, all over him. Swamping Pelé. And you can be sure that tears are flowing down his cheeks.
One reason his career can feel difficult to place beside that of modern players' careers is that his prime unfolded in a different football economy. Today, the best South American teenagers are often transferred to Europe before they fully become legends at home. But Pelé stayed at Santos through the years when he might have dominated European club football, partly because Santos valued him, but also because Brazil understood his importance, and the structure of the game was different at that time. In 1961, Brazil reportedly declared Pelé an official national treasure, a symbolic move that helped discourage foreign clubs from taking him abroad. Real Madrid, Juventus, Manchester United, and Inter Milan had all been linked with him at different times, but Pelé's greatness was built in Brazil and on the world stage. That makes his career unusual to modern eyes. He didn't need Europe to become universal. His famous 1000th goal also showed how large his public life had become. On November 19th, 1969 at the Maracanã, Pelé scored from the penalty spot for Santos against Vasco da Gama.
Caminhou Pelé, apontou. Olha o time do Santos. Olha a loucura. Olha a loucura. O time do Santos no meio de campo. Olha a loucura pelo 20º gol. Palmas de todo o Maracanã.
The match had to be stopped as reporters, photographers, and officials rushed onto the field. Now, the numbers have been debated because Pelé's totals include friendlies, military matches, state selections, and international tours, but the celebration revealed something bigger. Pelé had reached a summit no ordinary sporting career could approach. He dedicated the moment to children, again linking his public image to the poverty and vulnerability he had known. The Santos years also made him a symbol of football's global appeal. Before globalization became a sports business buzzword, Santos would tour Europe, Africa, Asia, and North America. In some places, Pelé's arrival was treated almost like a state visit. During Nigeria's civil war, stories grew around a temporary ceasefire connected to Santos' visit in 1969. Although historians debate the exact details, what is beyond dispute is that Pelé could draw crowds and attention almost anywhere he went. There was also a technical legacy in the way that people learned the game after watching him. The bicycle kick, the sudden change of pace, the explosive header, and calm finish across the goalkeeper. He didn't invent all of those things, but he made them a part of football's shared tapestry. Young players would not only copy his tricks, but his posture too. He would play with his chest up, scanning, ready to turn. He made football look joyful and at times effortless. Life after football was long, busy, and sometimes complicated. Pelé became one of the most recognizable former athletes on earth. He appeared in films, television, commercials, and global campaigns. He acted in the 1981 film Escape to Victory alongside Michael Caine, Sylvester Stallone, and several other footballers. He endorsed products, traveled constantly, and served as the smiling face of the game. To many people who knew almost nothing about football, Pelé was football. He also entered public service. In 1995, Brazilian President Fernando Henrique Cardoso appointed Pelé as Brazil's Minister of Sport. In that role, he pushed for reforms designed to bring more transparency and professionalism to Brazilian football. The legislation became known as the Pelé Law. It sought to reduce corruption, modernize club structures, and give players greater freedom in their careers. Now, like many reforms in football, it was debated, resisted by some, and imperfectly applied, but it showed that Pelé's post-playing life wasn't just ceremonial. He tried to use his name to change the system that had shaped him. His public work extended beyond government. Pelé also served as United Nations Ambassador for Ecology and the Environment and was named a UNESCO Goodwill Ambassador. He supported humanitarian causes connected to children, poverty, and education. The sincerity of that work was tied to his own childhood. Pelé knew what it meant to have talent without resources, dreams without equipment, and ambition without security. His presence in global campaigns gave them visibility that few athletes could offer. There were controversies too, as there usually are in lives lived so publicly. Pelé's relationships, business dealings, and public comments sometimes drew criticism. Some Brazilians felt he was too cautious politically, especially when compared with athletes who openly challenged injustice. Others felt he protected his image too carefully. He had complicated family relationships as well, including public issues involving his son Edinho. The point is not to pretend that Pelé was flawless. He was indeed human, and his fame made every human flaw seem larger. But the scale of his influence also made his achievements impossible to set aside. The awards and accolades continued long after he stopped playing. In 1999, the International Olympic Committee named him the Athlete of the Century, an extraordinary honor for someone who had never played in the Olympic Games. In 2000, FIFA named him co-player of the century alongside Diego Maradona. It was a compromise that reflected both men's enormous followings and the impossibility of settling football debates cleanly. Pelé also received the FIFA Order of Merit, an honorary knighthood from Great Britain, and later the FIFA Ballon d'Or Prix d'Honneur in 2014 that recognized a career that had unfolded before non-European players were eligible for the Ballon d'Or. He was named in the Ballon d'Or Dream Team in 2020. Each honor was another attempt to put formal language around a legacy that had already escaped measurement. In his later years, Pelé's health declined. He dealt with mobility problems and appeared less often in public. In 2021, he was diagnosed with colon cancer and underwent treatment. Then on December 29, 2022, Pelé died in Sao Paulo at the age of 82 from multiple organ failure related to the progression of cancer. Brazil mourned him not simply as a retired footballer, but as a piece of its identity. His wake at the Santos Stadium, where so much of his legend had been built, was attended by thousands who had come to say goodbye. Even in death, the language around Pelé showed the size of the space that he occupied. Tributes came in from Brazil and around the world, from FIFA, from clubs, from politicians, artists, and players who'd never even seen him play, but still understood that they were descendants of his football world. Neymar, Messi, Cristiano Ronaldo, Kylian Mbappe, and countless others spoke of him as more than a former champion. He was a source. In Portuguese, the word Pelé was later added to a dictionary as a synonym for someone or something exceptional, incomparable, and unique. Few athletes become adjectives. Pelé became one because his name had long ago stopped belonging to only one man. The legacy he left behind is almost too large to summarize, but it begins with the way he expanded football's imagination. He showed that a player could be both efficient and beautiful, both a scorer and creator, and a competitor as well as a performer. His game contained power and grace, discipline, and improvisation. He could score the practical goal, but also attempt the impossible one. He helped make the number 10 shirt sacred. He helped make Brazil the spiritual home of attacking football. He helped turn the World Cup into the sport's grandest stage for individual genius. His legacy also lives in representation. Pelé became a global black icon at a time when much of the world was still defined by open racism. He did not carry that role in the same activist style as Muhammad Ali, but his excellence had political meaning, whether he chose that language or not. A poor black Brazilian boy became the most famous athlete on earth. That image mattered. It traveled into homes, newspapers, cinemas, and television screens. It suggested that greatness could come from places often ignored. The debates around Pelé will never fully disappear. How many goals did he really score? How would he have done in modern Europe? Was he greater than Maradona, Messi, or Cristiano Ronaldo? Those arguments are part of football's fun, but they can also miss the point. Pelé's greatness is not only on a spreadsheet, it is historical. He was the first footballer to become truly planetary. He won before global sports marketing became a machine. He became a myth when the World Cup was still the one stage that could make a player immortal. He carried Brazil's story, Santos' golden age, and the sport's beauty into the wider world. In the end, Pelé's life feels like one of football's origin stories. The poor boy with the homemade ball who would become king, the teenager who cried in Sweden and then would go on to become the man who would lift football into an art form. The retired player became an ambassador, minister, humanitarian, celebrity, and symbol. His story had joy, pressure, contradictions, pain, and triumph. It had everything that football has. Pelé did not invent the beautiful game, but more than anyone, he taught the world what that phrase could mean. When he ran, football looked lighter. When he jumped, it seemed to pause in midair. When he smiled, the game felt generous. And when he left, the world understood that it had not merely lost a great player, it had lost one of the people who made football global, magical, and forever worth loving. We hope that you've enjoyed this trip through the life of one of the greatest footballers to ever play the game. Now, if you've enjoyed this story, hit the like and subscribe buttons. In our next episode, we continue our series on the World Cup. So join us next time as we look for more than just a score.